Happy New Year, Steve.
Is it New Year's already?
Shout out to 2022. Yeah, it is. Well, not as we're recording this, but by the time this comes out, it will be past New Year's. So
Oh,
we're doing a quick little future proofing, which we just ruined now. But happy 2022, man. Dang. 21 was better than 2020, but still a pretty weird year, that's for sure.
yeah. Well, maybe for you it was, but yeah. I mean, it definitely flew by. I think for a
Yep.
lot of people, 2020 kind of dragged with. I don't know. Did something big happen in the world in 2020? I don't remember. Um,
Um, I mean, the Dodgers won the World Series, which was a drag for everybody.
oh,
So,
that's true. Yeah, LA winning is just a huge
yeah.
detriment to everybody. Big wet blanket
Yeah,
whenever LA sports
big
wins.
fat asterisks on that championship, but it's
Yeah,
all good.
but yeah, 2021 has kind of flown by, and I think part of what has contributed to that, in all honesty, is the amount of great content we've gotten this year. I mean, we got four Marvel movies, what, four or five TV shows. As we're recording this, Book of Boba Fett just premiered today. I got to go watch that after we're done recording.
Literally today.
Um,
Hmm.
and we also got Amazon's Wheel of Time series, which I'm a little hesitant to include in that great content now. I think out of everything I just listed, obviously I haven't started Book of Boba Fett yet, but I would say Wheel of Time probably on the lower end, if not below everything that Marvel put out this year. And I hate to start the episode out on such a dour note, but man, that last episode really kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I know as a book reader, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you mentioned that a lot of stuff got changed, and from the look on your face and the tone in your voice, it seemed like not a lot of it was for the better. But even as a non-book reader, I couldn't help coming away feeling pretty underwhelmed by the finale. Not ready to give up on the show by any means, but you asked me what my rating was for it, and I said I'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you go back a couple episodes in our podcast, this was one of the shows and one of just the things of the year that I was most looking forward to. And this was something that I was getting hyped for. Initially, the show was actually supposed to come out last year, and the big COVID thing happened. If you hadn't heard of it, that happened
Oh,
last
that's
year.
it. That's right. That
That
happened in
might have been what
2020.
it was.
I
Yeah.
forgot.
Uh, actually, the show producers were just so sad that the Dodgers won that they decided to put the show off a whole year. There was no other reason. So, no, but, of course, there were some challenges presented by that. And, I mean, first of all, if I can take a step back before talking about Wheel of Time, like you said, it's amazing how much stuff we've gotten this year, given that last year, 2020, was pretty much nothing. Like, there was maybe a couple movies that came out that went straight to streaming, like HBO Max or whatever. But just, every single movie or TV show that at least was significant enough that I super, super cared about, other than a couple things here and there, got pushed off or delayed or whatever. And 2021, the backlog kind of started actually all coming out. And it was amazing getting to just see something week after week after week after week. And I know a lot of this was not planned to come out like so quick after each other, but I'm definitely not complaining, and I hope that they keep it up at this point. Marvel, especially, but also just the speed at which just the entertainment industry in general is pumping out stuff is just, it seems like it's accelerated, and obviously a huge amount of that is because it was all stuff that was supposed to be in 2020 and 21, now just in 21. But I'm hoping that that keeps up. But I'm hoping it doesn't affect the quality at all as well, because we've already seen with a few of the shows and a few other things that COVID had impacts on those. And of course, we don't necessarily have to deal with the same lockdowns and stuff that they did before. But you can see what happens when you have more limited resources and more limited time to make a piece of art. And whether that's because of COVID or because of just trying to fit more stuff into a schedule, I'm just hoping that that's not something that makes any issues as these entertainment companies like Disney and Apple and whoever, Amazon, are putting out all this stuff, because I like the quantity, and I'm just hoping the quality sticks up with it. And that, unfortunately, like you said, was not the case with the Wheel of Time second half of the season. Oh, man. Yeah, I am going to have a very tough time this episode not getting into stuff from the book, because like I said when we talked about the first half of the season, I am trying to view this as its own piece of art, as its own piece of entertainment. and not just constantly be comparing it to the books. And even if I take that away, there was still a lot that was left to be desired by the second half of this show, which really pains me to say because there was a lot that was really promising about it. A few of the episodes I just straight up loved, and yeah, I'm hoping that a season 2 can take some of the criticism and improve because, whew, there's a lot, especially with the finale. Oh my gosh, but yeah, I don't know if I have a rating overall for the season, but it was dropped significantly, probably 2 or 3 points just by the finale itself, which I don't know if that's how everyone felt, but it seems like you and I are on the same page about that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like we've mentioned before, part of the reason that I have not started reading the books is because I wanted to be able to view the show as its own entity. And despite how you are admirably trying to separate them, I'm sure it's nearly impossible, given, it's got all the same characters. Well, not obviously not all the same characters, Wheel of Time is a deep lore filled with thousands and thousands of characters. But I can definitely see how it would be a very difficult time trying to separate them, even to the different mediums here. Wasn't so hard for me because, again, that's why I stay away from the books so that I could just view the show as the show and then go back and read the books later. And, you obviously have some issues with stuff that they changed, and we don't have to talk about that because that would get into book spoilers. But for me, even as a show watcher alone, like there was so much in like the last 3 episodes that didn't really make sense to me, and even especially the finale. Like I think, I mean, I don't want to say completely dropped the ball, but I mean, I guess I'll say it. I mean, the finale dropped the ball. I mean, there was so much there that made zero sense to me narrative wise, like decisions for certain characters that, I don't even know their futures, but it seems like the show is setting them up like through the dialogue of the characters to go one way, and then the actions that actually happen on screen are going completely separately. And I don't think there's any better, and I don't think there's any better example than Rand, who we find in episode 7 is the Dragon Reborn. Like you had mentioned earlier, the books don't really have the kind of who done it kind of vibe to them, where they hide who the dragon is from the start, and you have to kind of guess, or it's revealed later which of the main 5 it is. But the show kind of played with that in the first few episodes, and then end of episode 7 had Rand just reveal that he was the dragon through, I guess he was told to it by the wind, and I mean that's fine if they want to keep that secret for a reveal later, but it seemed like it was a real swing and a miss as far as, what should have been, in my opinion, a real huge moment for him at the end. It's fine if you want to keep him in the background a little bit. I think he probably had the least to do out of any of the characters up until that point. But if he's supposed to be the Dragon Reborn and the focal character of the show and the series moving forward, I mean, he kind of went off with Moraine and did his own thing at the end, and he had, a moment, but it wasn't like the big triumphant, I'm the main guy moment. And I think that's, from what I understand, supposed to be kind of the crux of the story, is that it is the Dragon Reborn. And I just didn't get that at all from the finale. It seemed like there were other characters with bigger moments than him. And, we'll talk about the girls in a sec, but I mean, the other 2 characters, Perrin and Matt, did nothing in the finale. And, we get this soliloquy from Pat and Fane directly to Perrin's face about how all 5 of them are, Rand might be the dragon, but all 5 of them are very important to the wheel. And like 2 of them had major moments. Rand kind of in the middle, supposed to be the main character, had like he was at least doing something. But then Perrin and Matt, just absolute nowhere to be found. I mean, the 2 of them could have basically been written out of the show from my perspective, and not much would have changed. And that was disappointing to me. Looking back, again, there were episodes that I really liked about this show. On first watch, I really liked one of the earlier episodes where it focused on Steppen, the warder of the Aes Sedai who had died in the battle before. And really the episode was about Lan, but it was, through the relationship that he had with Steppen. And, I thought the episode did a really good job of, developing and fleshing out the relationship between an Aes Sedai and a warder and how powerful that can be. But by the end of the season, I mean, the main five really didn't get all their, allotted time to shine as I thought they should have, considering how apparently vital they're going to be moving forward. And now looking back, I'm like, that episode, I enjoyed it when I watched it, but how can you prioritize that over the actual main characters, especially for a character that doesn't even make it through the end of his own episode? That just didn't make sense to me from a story structure standpoint, and is upstaged even because apparently Lan doesn't even have that strong a bond with his Aes Sedai, Moraine, as Nynaeve has to like tell him how to do things at the end. Like, that was really silly to me. And so I can only imagine how disappointing, that was for you to watch.
Yeah, I'm not going to go necessarily through individual nitpicks. For example, like Nynaeve telling Lan how to track the person that he's literally been bonded with via magic for the last 20 years when she literally just met her one time. Okay, I guess I'll drop that one nitpick. I'm not going to go into individual nitpicks because there's a lot. I have a couple of just key issues that really came to the forefront with the finale. The first one is, like you said, not giving the main, we'll say main seven, right? If we include Lan, Moraine, and then the five kids, not giving them enough time to really become fleshed out. And this, like you said, is especially true of the three boys. But I would argue even the other four as well. We had an entire episode pretty much based around Steppen, right? Which, like you said, I liked that episode a lot, and I thought it did a really good job of describing, like, the bond between an Aes Sedai and their warder, right? Which is a really key part of how the world works there, right? We had a huge amount of an episode dedicated to Logain, who, past that, we don't see again, right?
Well, no, we do. We see him
for one scene. We see him for one scene later on. We get an entire, like, prologue backstory to Suon, the Amerlin Seat, who is there for one episode, right? We get more, like, backstory to her than we do to any of the five from, like, the village. And we get more of a backstory to Logain than we do pretty much any of the five from the village. And it's just, for these characters that only have, like, one... There's pretty much 3 episodes based around those 3 characters. And Moraine is there, and, like, Moraine is there, and Lan's there a little bit, and everyone else does a little bit, but they're really the focal point of 3 out of the 8 episodes. So what's that, like 40%, 37.5% of the episodes are focused solely on a character that either doesn't show up after that episode or only shows up for like 1 2-minute scene, right? And so that's just so strange to me why that would be the case when you don't give everybody one episode necessarily, but when you get to the end of the finale and we still don't really know like that much about these characters, not enough to really care about them other than, oh, they're fun, they're like a fun personality, or I know I'm supposed to like this person, but like it's just so strange to me that we don't even really know like a whole lot of their motivations or things about them other than they've been dragged along on this quest. And like, what is driving Perrin really? Nothing. He's just kind of going along and things are happening to him and he's questioning his like place in the world a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But like there's nothing driving him.
Apparently mouth breathing is driving Perrin because this actor just had his jaw half open every time he was on screen. Like, dude had the same face.
Oh, I don't blame him at all. I mean, I don't blame him. He's getting nothing to work with. And Matt, I'll give an exception to because the actor was not there to film the last 2 episodes, so I'm sure that they had to completely rewrite him. So the fact that in the last 2 episodes he pretty much doesn't show up other than that last little scene there, I don't put that on the show. That was the actor dropping out, and they have already recast him for season 2. That's just something that's really unfortunate. I would imagine that he probably was there with Perrin or in the place of Perrin in the finale because he's the only one that had any interaction with Padan Fain up until that point. They have that back and forth in the first episode. Perrin has never even interacted with him on screen before, and so I imagine they probably had something else for Perrin to do, but then when Matt, the actor Barney Harris, dropped out we still don't know why.
Probably getting bullied because his name is Barney.
they probably rewrote Perrin to go do that, but it doesn't quite fit, and they didn't know what to do with him, and it was probably all very last second. So like I'm willing to have a little bit of grace there, but even still, just was like what. Um, so my biggest issue has been not enough time dedicated to the main characters, and that bleeds into my second biggest issue with this season, which is just the lack of world building, I guess, and the show kind of wants to have its cake and eat it too. And this is not me complaining about changes from the books, but I am going to reference the books. The show seems to want to change things from the books to like that are not needed for just like condensing, right? Obviously there are things that have to change to condense it into 8 episodes. Obviously there are things that just have to get changed to go from a written medium to a visual one. But there are lots of things that are changed that don't seem to be for those reasons. And so it seems like the showrunners want to tell their own version of the books, which in theory is totally fine, right? It's a different medium. You're totally allowed to change things and do that. But then they also kind of want to have their cake and eat it too, because so many of the things are so dependent, it seems, on having read the books to understand them. Because there's so many like characters or names that get dropped, or like the Sangreal in the last episode, or right, the Ways, or like the wall painting that Moraine like teleports through in episode 6, or like there's all these things that pop up here or there, or like the horn at the end, the horn of Valer. All these things that it's like, it seems like it's relying on you having read the books and already knowing what those things are in order to understand what's going on in the show. And even a lot of the characters, right? It's like, oh, they're expecting you to fill in the gaps with knowledge from the books, but they're also kind of trying to change a lot from the books to tell their own story. And it's like this kind of weird dynamic where they're super reliant on the books, but also not staying super, super faithful to them. And I think either of those things is fine, but like for someone who has never read the books, I mean, there was a lot that I was confused about from a narrative perspective, and so I can't imagine someone who never read the books and doesn't have someone that read the books there watching with them to explain stuff. Like, I would just be so confused because they haven't established, like, exactly how the magic works. They haven't established, like, where any of these places are, like, geographically speaking. They haven't really established the stakes. Like, they haven't really shown the stakes of like the conflict that they're going at. And so it's just very confusing to me as to why some of those creative decisions were made. And it seems like a lot was cut out and not explained, expecting you to already know them, but then not. I don't know. It seems very strange to me. And a lot of that I was expecting to get paid off in the finale and wasn't. So those are my two biggest issues. Not enough development and time with the actual main characters, specifically Rand. Like you said, Rand has had nothing to do all season. That's not because there's nothing for him to do. That was an active choice to maintain his right, to maintain the mystery. And then the other is just, it seems like they are super reliant on the books to fill in the background. Or even like on Amazon, if you go look at like the X-ray or like the Amazon show, like the main screen that has all the episodes, there's all sorts of like extra videos and stuff that explain who the Ogier are and what this is and what this is. And it's like, you can't rely on that extra stuff to tell the story and build the world. Like, you have to do it in the show because it's part of the show. Like, you have to do that. If it's small stuff that's not important to the show and just like fun little facts, that's fine. But if it's stuff that's integral to the show, like, you can't just dump that off on these side videos that people I didn't even know those existed until like a couple days ago. So those are my biggest issues without necessarily going into super specific like nitpicks.
Yeah, well, I can go into some specific nitpicks to expound on what you're talking about, and I totally agree. Again, even as someone who doesn't know what's supposed to happen, it seemed like there was a lot of stuff, like you said, that was there for book readers to already understand what it is. And I mean, you had a little slip of the tongue when you were saying the show tellers, and I think that's really emblematic of what's the main issue is. And you know, one of the most basic tenets of storytelling is to show and not tell. And I feel like a lot of this show was just them telling us that things are important without showing us why. And, you know, we get a tiny taste of that in the finale where we have the opening scene with the first dragon, and we have this crazy shot of what life was like back when he was around. I think they say 3,000 years ago, compared to where the show is, most taking place. And they have like flying cars and crazy advanced technology. And they say multiple times that the last dragon broke the world. And, if we had seen that earlier, it would have shown us how far society got crumbled. It's taken them 3,000 years to rebuild to where they are now. And they're basically at like a rudimentary medieval society compared to, again, flying vehicles and just insane cities. And that would have been some nice context to have in order to understand the ramifications of what happens if the dragon makes the wrong choice. You mentioned the sangreal. Literally right before Randa's going to need to use it, Moraine like pulls it out of her Mary Poppins bag and is like, oh, here's a sangreal. It's important. You're going to need this immediately. It was like a video game where you pick up an item right before it's going to be useful before a boss fight. And, the horn of whatever you want to call it. Horn of Valir, that's what it's called?
Yeah, the Horn of Valir. Yep.
Yeah, like the soldiers or the Kingsguard or whatever they're called were just like digging it up in the throne room, and Perrin comes in, he's like, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's this super important horn. It's very powerful and useful. And then it's not used, and like we're not supposed to care about it from a pure watcher's perspective. It seemed like there was a lot of stuff, like you said, that show watchers only would not get, but book readers were supposed to like do the Leo DiCaprio like pointing me where they're like, oh, hey, that's that thing I know, and already have that context in their mind. And I just don't think the show did a very good job of, explaining why things are important and setting, vital context for apparently super important things. Definitely one of my biggest issues with the show. Again, I think they are just telling you that things are supposed to be important, without actually showing why. Like if we had a flashback scene earlier in the show of, the horn being used and the effect that it had, supposed to draw all the allies of the dragon to his side in his time of need. That would have been great, but instead they're like, no, it's the Horn of Valir. It's supposed to call the allies of the dragon to his side in time of need. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
You want to like use it? Should we do that? I don't know.
Yeah, stuff like that only takes like one or two lines. You don't even really need a flashback. All it takes is like a couple lines, or when they're in the bar, the episode before, right? All it takes is them overhearing someone saying, oh, like the mystical horn, whatever. Do you believe it's real? Oh, I don't even think it's real. And then boof. Or like all it takes is like a couple lines here and there to establish these things as thoughts in our head, and then boom. And like that is the stuff that it doesn't take a time crunch. That takes literally a couple lines in one episode. And it's kind of mind-boggling that they didn't have those in there. But you can't really blame that on the time constraint. And I agree with you with the intro or the cold open to the finale, with that not hitting as hard as it should have if it was earlier. Could you imagine if, like in the first episode, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be the first episode, but I'm just imagining out of all the cold opens, the first one I think was the weakest, where there's just the two men channelers that are running away from the Aes Sedai, that the two male channelers never show up again, we never hear anything about them again, they're just gone, right? And we get the idea that men who can channel go mad, right? And we get the idea that they're getting hunted down. But that, as a concept, doesn't even really come up again until a couple episodes later. And, like, the Red Sisters that were chasing them, they show up and they matter, but they're not, like, central to the story in any way at this point. And it's like, imagine if there was something like that really showed, like, the destruction that happens when a male channels. And I think part of that is because they wanted to hide the fact that it was probably a man. Although Moraine says it could have been a man or a woman. And so if they're trying to still have the mystery of it being all of them, just the fact that it was a man at one point doesn't mean if he was reborn. Because she literally says we don't know if he was reborn as a man or as a boy or a girl. And so it's like, I think they moved that as to try and not spoil that it was one of the three boys. But like they already said that they didn't know which it was reborn as. So like imagine if they had seen that in like the first or maybe even the second episode, right? Once it's already established that they're looking for this person, the cold open to the second episode is like, here's why, because this is the stakes. This is what happens if, like, this is what they stand to lose if they make the wrong decision or if the dragon gets corrupted or something.
Right.
Like, as opposed to just tossing it in the last episode and then immediately resolving the conflict in that episode. It's like without that hanging over the whole season, it feels like there was just a lot missed.
Right, and even to go down this road a little bit further, the whole mystery of who the dragon is. I mean, I appreciated it at first to kind of not be sure which of the four, and I guess Nynaeve counts as well. But we're told from the opening that she's not the right age, and again, like I had mentioned, I think I even talked about this in our previous episode about the first few episodes of Wheel of Time. If it's one of the girls, then you totally don't even have to worry about the madness route, which to me just makes for a far less interesting story if the dragon is not struggling with himself internally about potentially going insane and bringing about destruction. As well as, before Nynaeve even comes back into the picture after being supposedly killed in the first episode, and we can talk about fake out deaths here shortly too. It's Egwene and the three boys, so I mean, statistically, it's probably not going to be her. So again, like I appreciate that they wanted to have a bigger reveal for Rand. As I did like that scene in episode 7 where it's shown flashing back through the rest of the show and times where he channeled and we didn't actually see that from that perspective. So I appreciated that reveal at the time. But again, it came at the detriment of any real development for Rand. Like he apparently figures out he's the dragon in the last few seconds of episode 7, and then they just go off, him and Moraine alone, to handle dragon stuff. And it's like, okay, like why? Like he hasn't shown to do anything super powerful, which the last dragon, was obviously the most powerful channeler the world had ever seen, and the Dragon Reborn is supposed to be similar. Like we haven't seen anything that actually shows that he is the dragon other than just being told it. And like, again, character development got thrown by the wayside for the mystery of who it could be. And I think, again, just another drop ball. But yeah, fake out deaths. Nynaeve has 2 of them in the show. I mean, I don't think anybody for a second bought that she, was actually dead in the first episode when the Trollocs are just massacring everybody in town, and then they just drag her off screen. Like, dude, come on.
It's the classic. It's the classic when someone looks at another character, and it, like says Nynaeve or enter character's name, and the other person says they're gone, and then they cry. Like whenever they say they're gone, it's immediately like, it's like at the end of this one when Rand leaves, and then Moiraine, like Lan shows up, and she's like, he's gone, and Lan's like, oh, it's like whenever they say gone, it always means it's a fake out death or not a death. It's like, bro.
Yeah, unless you see a body, they're not dead. And the second one happens in the finale here.
That's why that White Cloak is still alive.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Child Valda is definitely alive, and he was like my favorite character from the show.
Another fake out too.
But so Nynaeve's second fake out death happens in the finale. Like she and like 4 other women are like channeling to stop this massive Trolloc army, which again, I don't even know why they sent the army out there to just die at the wall if these 4 weak channelers, 3 weak channelers and 2 untrained, albeit, Egwene and Nynaeve are supposed to be super powerful, but they're untrained. They hold off the entire army by themselves. And
like 10,000 too.
Using their combined, yeah, they said it. Well, it obviously didn't look like 10 or 20,000, but that was told to us. And like they are able to hold off this army at the expense of 2.5 channelers who, again, one of them we barely get any screen time with, and 2 are literally just NPCs. And then Nynaeve and Egwene, the combined power of channeling the source together just taps out the other 3. And then Nynaeve also dies in Egwene's arms with her face looking all charred and stuff. And then Egwene just like cries and is sad, and then just brings Nynaeve back from the dead for some reason. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Like that seems pretty powerful, but neither of them is supposed to be the dragon. So like Nynaeve had her crazy Super Saiyan scene in like episode 3 when Logain goes crazy and kills Lan and the other sister and mortally wounds Moraine, and then Nynaeve just goes like Nakali Street Fighter and like just saves everybody, and then Egwene like cries and brings her friend back from the dead, which is like insanely powerful. And like we don't get any scenes like that from the other characters who are supposed to be just as powerful as they are, or in Rand's case, like significantly more powerful. Like Logain went berserk and killed like everybody in that room, and Moraine was like, "Your power is supposed to be like a flickering of light against the raging sun that is the dragon." And Rand like has his moment. I don't even want to say his moment. He just has a moment where he has to use the Sangreal, which has 100 combined male channeler strength tapped inside it. But Egwene can just like raise the dead, and so can Nynaeve apparently. Like that, okay, sure.
Takes all the stakes out of it.
Yeah, and like I don't want to believe that anybody's dead in the future now if Egwene can just be like sad and like heal them instantly. So like we saw Loyal get stabbed by Padan Fane with the cursed blade, and you just rolled your eyes. And I'm assuming that doesn't happen in the books because of your reaction.
He's gonna be fine.
But yeah, like why even manufacture this tension? Like this is again coming at the expense of real character development and shining moments for the main character. Yeah. And like Rand again has basically nothing to do the entire the entire season.
He pointed a glowy rock at somebody.
Oh, he did, and he also shot 3 arrows into the bullseye of a target, like when he was crying. So he did a ton. Oh, I can't forget, he knocked that door down too. So the Dragon Reborn, no doors can stand in his way. That's for sure.
I know. I just hope that they do justice to at least him, and I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, when I think of 10,000, right, I think of Helm's Deep, because that's the number that's given for the orcs at Helm's Deep, right? Which is a lot of dudes. Like, way the heck more than we're in this. Which, granted, it's not fair to direct compare because there's a massive budget movie with, like, tons of people able to be there and extras and everything, compared with one episode of a TV show. Even at $10 million an episode is not even close to the budget of the movie. Although, of course, that's just one scene of the movie.
Yeah, it's also not fair to compare because Lord of the Rings is good.
Oh yeah, but even just in terms of like looking at the scale of the armies and stuff, right? That was maybe like a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 Trollocs, probably not even, probably like 700 or 800 that we actually saw. But if it's 10,000, if we take them at that, and 5 people untrained just wasted it, what are the stakes? Like what? If that was the biggest they had ever seen before.
Man, those other Aes Sedai back in the past must have just been insane wussies. Like, what are you doing if you can't handle this?
And what the heck? All the Aes Sedai at the tower, there's like what, hundreds we can assume. We don't know exactly how many, but there's a heck of a lot. Like a lot of them there, and they're all trained and like it's assumed that they're more powerful.
Yeah.
There's no shot the Dark has. It's not even like they don't even need the dragon. It's just, yeah, it's tough, but. Hey, I do want to talk about a couple of positive things though, because obviously we have spent literally the entire time ragging on the show in the end.
Well, yeah, before we get to, there are some positive things I want to talk about,
yes.
but I don't want to come back to negatives after that. So I'll just get the rest of the negatives out of the way. And I think these are unrelated, well, somewhat related to the delays in production caused by, COVID, but like the visuals in this show just did not do it for me. I think there were some really nice sets, especially like when they were in Tarvalon, walking the city streets. I really enjoyed the look of that. But any of the CGI looked pretty bad. Aside from Loyal, I think looked fine. But the Trollocs and honestly, anytime anybody channeled looked really goofy. And I'm hoping that an increased budget and no, fingers crossed, more delays or restrictions contribute to a better looking show in season 2 as far as effects go. And secondly, I think, we haven't talked about this yet, but I think the music for me was very forgettable. Obviously, there's no music in the books. I'm just imagining what stuff might sound like. But, one of the big draws for Game of Thrones is that it has an absolute banger of an opening theme, and the music throughout the show is just incredible. Even in the later seasons, episode 6 finale where Cersei blows up the Sept, like that's the opening scene of the episode, and the music that plays is just fantastic. That's definitely one thing you can not say Game of Thrones did poorly ever is music and sound design. And I don't think Wheel of Time has like a bad intro or anything like that, but like for an epic fantasy show, which this is supposed to be and trying to be, clearly. Like, you should have some sweeping scores and something unique and memorable that, when people hear that, like, oh, that's Wheel of Time, or like that's Rand's theme. And there was just nothing. Like, this was just the most generic audio I think I've ever heard. And that to me doesn't seem like something that would be affected by delays or anything like that. And that's for some it might be a major nitpick. For me, I don't think it's necessarily extremely minor, but it's not the biggest issue I have with the show. But again, it's something that I think should definitely be able to be improved going forward. Like, lack of memorable score or setting or effects is definitely just going to be another couple nails in the coffin if this show can't like get it together in the next season or two.
Yeah, no, I am not one to really talk on soundtracks because honestly, I don't catch the music in pretty much anything that I watch unless it's Portals and Endgame. But I will agree that at least the opening theme, I think the visuals are insanely cool, and I think the opening like credits as a whole are awesome. But I could not like for 1 second even hum 3 seconds of the actual intro music because I have no clue what it is. Because it doesn't just stick. It just doesn't stick in your head. It's not like the Game of Thrones. I'm not gonna hum it because I'm terrible at music. Yeah, like, I mean, you hear the first 2 notes of that, and you instantly know, boom, that's Game of Thrones, right? And that just doesn't have it with this one. And again, I think all the visuals for that are super cool, and I think the theme overall is awesome. The opening intro meaning, but the theme music, I'll agree,
again, like forgettable.
Not bad, just. It's there, and but that for me is not as big a deal, because I usually skip the intros anyway. But I do think that Game of Thrones did do that one thing super well as well. The intro always gave some narrative as well, right? When they are going city to city to city, it highlights what are the important locations. And obviously at this point, there's way more locations in 8 seasons of Thrones than in 1 season of the Wheel of Time, obviously. Like, we've only had maybe 5 major locations at this point, maybe 4. But just having that just gives you an idea of the world and, like, what locations are important at the given moment. And, I mean, obviously it follows many more storylines than Wheel of Time does currently as well. So it's not the same. But even just using the time and the space of having that intro gives some narrative instead of just being filler time. I think Thrones did that really well. And I think the Wheel of Time does that a little bit. Like, they have the Ajas on there, right? And it has a little bit of that, but it would be nice if it was more than just looking cool. But at this point, they're probably not going to change it. Although the Thrones one changed pretty regularly. They kept the same style, but they also changed like where exactly they went. So I'm hoping something like that happens with the Wheel of Time, that they keep the same style, but then highlight maybe an important theme for that season, or a couple key mythological characters, or just the characters we know, or things like that. Because like the first season, the theme seems to highlight like a history, almost like it's a banner or something. I'm totally blanking the word. A tapestry, like a historical tapestry or something. And it seems to be more historical than anything. And if there's stuff like that that still contributes to the story in a way that's, or builds the world, something like that, I think that's a wasted opportunity to not use that 2 minutes that happens on something like that. But I guess we'll see. And it's not the biggest deal because a lot of people do skip the intros anyway, but would be a nice bonus. But I'll get into some stuff that I did like. First of all, just even still seeing the characters on screen is just so fun for me, as someone that does have the benefit of knowing where they all end up at the end of this 14 book long series. It's just amazing, and there's nothing that can really take that away, especially over the first few episodes. And I think all of the main 7 characters were cast pretty much perfectly, which makes me pretty sad that Barney Harris as Matt is not going to be back. The next guy coming in, I don't know what he's been in, but he looks pretty similar, honestly. Looks like they could almost be brothers. And so he's got the looks nailed down. Obviously, I don't really know him as an actor. Don't even know his name. I just saw a picture of him one time. But I think the cast has pretty much, for the most part, been pretty spot on. And I think the acting overall has been as good as is doable with the material that they're given. Like, Rand early on had a lot of just like blank stares, and Perrin later on had a lot of slackjaw
Yeah, I was gonna
moments.
say blank looks and slack-jawed stares are, I
Yeah,
think, what was the entirety of Perrin's direction for the latter half of the season.
but I don't blame that on the actor Marcus Rutherford, because anytime he's been giving a chance to do anything, like when he's getting tortured by Child Valda, or in the moments right after killing Layla in the first episode, um, in any of these like painful moments, even when he's with Egwene in episode 3 and lighting the fire and like frustrated that he can't care for his friend, right? In these key moments, he's doing an awesome job in conveying tons of emotion and really shows how conflicted Perrin is and like wanting to protect the people around him, but also struggling with like where does violence fit into that. And in those moments, he does such a good job. And then they just have him running around like a doofus that doesn't know where he is half the time in the other parts of the episode. And I'm talking about the good things. So I will say, I'll just stop and I'll say, I think the actors when they are given the moments are doing a really good job with it, and I want to applaud each of them. And I definitely don't want this to come off on any of the actors, because I think they're all doing as best they can and really really well in a lot of moments. I especially think like the actor for Lan, Dan Henney, is doing just a phenomenal job. And I think Moraine is, I think the actress playing Moraine is doing an incredible job too. I totally just blanked
Rosamund
on her
Pike.
name. Rosamund Pike. Yep, that's it. She's doing awesome, and she's doing a really good job conveying like we think she's a good guy, but she definitely is just straight up making stuff up half the time when she doesn't know the answer, but is like appearing really confident, but also kind of shady. But also we think she's on our side. Like she's just doing a really good job portraying that. Yeah, I think she's absolutely nailing it, and I think, yeah, I think all the characters, again, when they're given time to shine, do really well, and that includes the side characters like Logain and Steppen and Suon. Like I loved all the backstories that they got. I wish it wasn't at the expense of the actual main characters that really matter, but I do think the moments like that is where the show shines more so than like the big spectacle of blowing stuff up or bringing someone back from the dead, or the stuff that like doesn't make quite as much sense. Like it's when we get to know the characters and when we kind of settle down and world build that it really really hits home for me. And part of that's because it's like, oh, this is hitting stuff that I know. But I also think that even if I wasn't reading the books, or if I hadn't read the books, I think that would still hit home for me. And I think those are the parts where the show just knocks it out of the park. And it leaves me wishing that they had more episodes. Amazon, we know you're listening. Please give them 10 episodes a season. This 8 nonsense is not enough. And it's the type of thing where they don't want to give 10 episodes because they don't want it to be as big of a risk, but then by not putting enough resources to it, it then is harder to do and it fails. And then they're like, see, we knew we shouldn't have put 10 episodes. It's like, no, people will watch this show. This was the most watched show by Amazon ever, I think, like that Amazon's put out. And it was,
Well, it will be until Lord of the Rings comes out next year.
well,
But
yeah, obviously. And it was number one in its, like, every single week that it came out, basically, across all streaming. And it's like, this show people are going to watch. Please give it 10 episodes a season. Please, please, please. And let us have those moments without taking away from the actual story and the main characters, because that's what makes a show good. And it's very obviously there, and it's very obviously very close. And just, I want to applaud it for those, since we've already talked about the negatives.
yeah, I'll agree with you on pretty much everything you said. I think the actors, again, when given their moments, have all done a fine job. Even the ones with not too much to do throughout the course of the season had bits to shine in, and I think they all did well when given the opportunity. But yeah, I agree with you. 10 episodes, I think, should be the standard going forward here. It's going to be obviously impossible to include anything from the book, really in any adaptation that you do, unless you're trying to make, an obscenely long show and stuff that's probably, going to be unwatchable to some extent. And that's for any source material, really. We saw it with Dune recently, and, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings are pretty good adaptations for the most part, but again, even those leave a ton out from the source material. But if you want to have these like smaller moments with side characters like Suan and Steppen and characters like that, they cannot come at the expense of the main cast. And if you need a couple more episodes to still have those moments with the side characters, while also fitting in the main cast, getting their due, then that's what's necessary. Because, again, I don't want all the side characters to just get punted with, such a obscenely large supporting cast. Like I said, there's thousands and thousands of characters in Wheel of Time. Again, you don't want to, like, they are important to the story, but you cannot prioritize them over the main five. I'm sorry. Again, even not knowing what's going to happen in the future, like, it's clearly wrong to me to make those choices the way they did. So, again, just coming off as negative here, but the positive message that I want to get here is, like, I want to see more. Like, show me more of the good stuff.
We want to have all of that. We don't want to cut out those interesting dives into the side characters. We want that and the main character development. So
Exactly.
just give us more episodes and we'll be good to go. I know they're already almost done filming season 2, so I really doubt that I pretty much know for a fact that the reception to season 1 will not affect season 2, at least definitely in terms of the number of episodes they have, because I'm sure they had that written well before they even put out the first episode of season 1. But for 3 and onwards, please more. And so to get into looking ahead at next season, we don't know quite when it's going to come out. I'm hoping, since they're getting close to wrapping up shooting, probably will be done by March or so. I'm hoping that they get it out probably early 23, I would imagine. Hopefully they spend lots of time on the CG and everything. But looking ahead at season 2, if you just had to give a couple predictions for what happens to, we'll say, the main 7, not each of them individually, but what are a couple key storylines that you expect to continue or really kind of begin? And if you just had to give a couple predictions for the next season, I'm not going to because obvious reasons.
Yeah, that'd be cheating.
Well, maybe not, because maybe it'll all be so different. Who knows? But what do you think?
Well, it's tough to give predictions, but I think, like, that's another good thing about the show is that I'm still interested in what happens. Like, they've set up enough interesting threads, and maybe that's something that, like we had touched on earlier, they bring up a lot of stuff in the last 2 episodes that will be important later on without fleshing it out here for this season. And I'm interested to see where pretty much everything goes. I still want to see what happens with the Dragon Reborn. The other main characters have all had interesting things happen to them, and they're all showing different levels of promise, and I want to see their end of their stories, as well as, Lane and Moraine are fascinating, I think, to different degrees. But I mean, I really have no clue what's going to happen. and it seems like Rand is going off to do his own dragon thing. Matt had that not post-credit scene, but, basically post-credit scene of him going back to Tar-Valon with a bad look in his eye. And to me, those are the 2 most interesting developments here. Rand being the dragon, again, which I wish they had done more with here, but I want to see what the dragon's capable of. I want to see where his story goes. And what's seeming to be a setup here for kind of a clash with his best friend, who's, like, turning towards the dark. I'm interested to see where that goes. So lots of promise here, but I think the finale left me underwhelmed, mostly because it didn't feel like a satisfying conclusion to the season. But I'm not closing the book on this show. I want to see where everything goes. I'm being critical because I think this show can be really, really excellent. And it just missed the bar for me in the finale and last couple episodes especially. So hoping to see more of the good stuff in season 2. Want these characters to become more developed and for the showrunners to show us why we should care about them and why they're important, instead of just telling us outright. And yeah, I'm not going to be sky high on season 2, but I'm absolutely going to tune in and see what happens. So I'm still in on this show, and I want to see more of the good stuff.
Yeah, I'm still in, and I expect season 2 to be better. I think that now that the whole mystery of the dragon is out of the way, they won't have to spend time on that. I think that they have done enough world building, kinda, that they don't have to focus on that stuff anymore. Although I still want them to continue world building because there's a lot that needs to be, even just within the context of the show itself. And I forgot where I was going with that, but I do think that with some of these things out of the way, I'm very excited. Plus COVID is still very much still a thing, but we're not going to see the lockdowns or restrictions that made it very difficult for them to film back in 2020. So,
hey, knock on wood, you never know what might happen. A new Greek letter could get invented, and we're going to have to do this all over
that's
again.
true. But that all makes me a bit hopeful about season 2. And I don't know what's up with those people with that giant freaking wave at the end, just straight up obliterating that little child.
Yeah, R.I.P. that one girl on the beach. They had to just show her how strong they were, I guess, by just murdering her with a tsunami. But all right, yeah, their design seemed interesting, kind of like a Far East look to them, and yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with them as well.
The world's getting a bit bigger because now we get introduced kind of for the first time to something that doesn't directly just happen to the main characters. You know, everything else has been seen directly through their eyes, so it's not like they're going to completely never come into contact, but it's clear that this is something that is not directly just happening to them. So the world's getting a bit bigger. And those are our thoughts on The Wheel of Time, episode 1 through 8. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to rewatch it and honestly probably try to reread the series before season 2 comes out. Not going to happen. But, you know, I'm going to give it a shot. And
well, not with that attitude, it won't. I believe in you.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. That's one a month, and I will still not make it. But, hey, it's all good. But any more thoughts, or are we good to get on out of here?
I think that's it. I think we said all we need to say. Let's get on out of here.
All right, give us your thoughts. Respond to the survey below. If you haven't on Spotify, give us a follow, like and subscribe. All that good stuff.
Smash that MF like button, baby.
All right, get out of here. Deuces.
Peace.